In October of 1981, one of the most infamous live band performances in SNL history occurred. It was the night that Fear was banned from SNL. Now, before I go any further talking about this infamous event in SNL history, I would like to give a special shout out to Vontae for requesting this topic. Initially, he wanted me to just do a reaction to Fear's performance on the show, but I decided to go one step further and make a whole video about the performance, specifically what led up to it, what happened in the aftermath, and just discuss uh, the incredible moment that this was. Because I feel that it's definitely one of the most intriguing and fascinating events when it comes to SNL history, especially when you see all that went into it and everybody that was a part of this live show. Now, if there's another topic or another film or a TV show that you would personally like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. So, Fear wound up on SNL due to John Belushi. The late, great John Belushi was a huge fan of the band Fear and punk rock in general. He saw Black Flag and a bunch of other punk rock bands alive and was just a huge fan of punk rock. Not in a poser way either. Like, he was a legitimate fan of the genre. It's one thing that makes John Belushi, who was already one of the most cool and legendary comics of his time, like even cooler, even more of a badass than he already was. I had no idea he was such a huge fan of punk rock, so I think that's just really awesome. And he initially nabbed Fear to work on a song for the soundtrack of a film that he was in with Dan Aykroyd called Neighbors. And I think he might have actually done some work with Fear for the song, but the producers, they didn't like the song. They felt it wasn't marketable enough or it wasn't a good fit, and so they passed on the song. And John understandably felt bad about that because of all the work that Fear and the band members and John himself put into it, and so he felt like he wasted Fear's time, and he wanted to make things up to them somehow. And that opportunity came when NBC and the new showrunner of SNL at the time, which I believe is Dick Ebersol, they approached John to make an appearance on the Halloween episode of the 7th season. This season had a lot riding on it because this was the next season after the infamously bad and disastrous 6th season, which was so bad and so critically derided and such a ratings failure that it almost canceled the entire show. Like, SNL almost ended after 6 seasons. Like, it was that dire. But somehow, some way, the show survived. I mean, this is a season, and I'm just gonna emphasize this because this is another aspect of SNL history that I find to be really interesting. And in all honesty, I think I'll make a standalone video on it sometime in the future because I think it could make for a really great video. So the 6th season of SNL was so bad and so poorly received that only 2 cast members from that season were retained and kept on after that season ended. I don't think there's a single season of the show that has had that many cast members not brought back for the next season. So that's really showing you that that season in particular was a massive failure, and because of that, there was a ton of pressure and a ton of extra reasons to try to make this season something special. And that's why the producers of the show and NBC reached out to John Belushi. Even if he only showed up for the cold open, that in itself could potentially boost the ratings and get this season in some better graces, with not just for the critics but for the fans. And I'm not even really sure whether or not John actually wanted to do this. And his whole reasoning behind being on the show was just something that he came up with to maybe get them to go a different direction because he didn't really want to do it. Because when you hear his demands, which were Fear has to perform live on the show and be the musical guest, and not only that, uh, you're going to allow me to bus in a bunch of real punk rock fans who will slam dance in the audience during the live show, during the performance of the band. It just sounds like something that John came up with off the top of his head to bullshit SNL and NBC to show that he's not really that serious, and just to come up with the most ridiculous, over the top demand possible, and not even believing for 1 second that they were gonna actually go along with it. It was like, yeah, I'm gonna. Oh, you want me to show up on SNL after you screwed over Lorne Michaels and didn't let him take a break, and then had the absolutely disastrous, embarrassing sixth season, and you want me to come on save this flagging, flailing version of SNL? Okay. Here are my stipulations. You gotta have Fear, a punk rock band, be the musical guest, and you gotta allow me to bring in real punk rock fans who are gonna slam dance in the audience. And so he's probably thinking, like, yeah, there's no way that they're gonna agree to this. And then they did. And then John, being the guy that he is, he was like, okay, let's watch this thing crash and burn. Because I think John, he went along with it because, first off, he was a huge fan of Fear, and this was a way for him to give back to Fear after the song that he did with them for Neighbors didn't wind up in the film. So this is a way for him to give back to the band, but also a way for him to kind of stick a middle finger in the face of this new regime at SNL. And John was kind of that guy. He was a rebel. So it kind of makes perfect sense that he initially was like, yeah, I'm only going to do it if you do something really ridiculous. And then they agreed to it. And then he was like, okay, I'll do it. But man, you have no idea what the hell you're in for. And they really didn't. Um, the showrunner, Dick Ebersol, and the head of NBC, Brandon Tartikoff, I think was the head of NBC at the time, they had no idea what the hell they were getting into when they agreed to all of these stipulations. And it led to one of the most infamous nights in the history of SNL. And this entire episode, by the way, is really wild. It's a Halloween episode. It actually did air on Halloween night in 1981. And the host was Donald Pleasence. Yes, Dr. Loomis from the Halloween films, among other roles. Like, Donald Pleasence was the host. And There's a lot of horror themed shorts that were sent in from various different people that were shown at various points throughout the episode. There were skits that were definitely inspired more by the horror genre. There's some that weren't, like a medieval skit and another skit involving, I think, maybe a World War I general or something along those lines. But a lot of it was very horror themed. So it's a fun watch in that regard if you're a fan of the horror genre, and just to see Donald Pleasance host SNL. And I don't know if this is true or not, but Donald Pleasance seemed like he was coked out of his mind while hosting this episode. You look at his monologue, you look at when he introduces fear. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you fear. like it's just it's peak Donald Pleasance, and if you are a fan of his, you've got to track down this episode because it is a fun watch. Like, I swear to God, he is coked out of his mind to the point where he's like rubbing his nose and just completely out of it. And that might be the reason why he was only in like two sketches out of the entire episode. But Fear, they they had two performances technically on this episode. So the first one went on without a hitch. Actually, there was no drama, there was no craziness. It was just Fear getting on stage and performing "I Don't Care About You," a censored version because they can't, drop the f bomb like in the actual song. But yeah, they performed "I Don't Care About You," and then lead singer leaving after the song was over, like threw the microphone down the stage and walked off, and that was it. Like the punk rock fans, they weren't really slam dancing in the audience or anything. Just a very basic, a standard SNL live performance for a band, and for a punk rock live performance, I thought it was actually pretty good. I always felt that Fear was one of the better live performers anyway, because if you watch their live performances, which were included in the decline of Western civilization, as well as other punk rock documentaries, or just random punk rock films that featured a bunch of punk rockers. Fear was definitely one of the bands that performed live that I think relatively pulled things off rather well. And it's the second performance, though, when things went to absolute hell. So the second performance was supposed to be 3 songs. They were going to perform Beef Bologna and New York's Alright If You Like Saxophones and War. But they only were able to perform 2 songs because this is when they had the punk rock fans in the audience, including John Belushi. And that's when they started doing their pogoing and slam dancing and leaping onto the stage and jumping off the stage and jumping in the crowd. This is also where the lead singer, Fear Leaving, just riled them up by saying things like, "It's great to be here in New Jersey." So, riled up the New York punks that were in the audience. So then it caused a fight between the New York punks and the DC punks and the Jersey punks. All of them are like just brawling with each other while Fear is performing their set. And what's crazy is there were actually a lot of genuine punk rockers that were in the crowd. You have Ian MacKaye from Minor Threat, the Meatmen's Tesco V, John Brandon of Negative Approach, Harvey Flanagan and John Joseph, who would then go on to form the Cro-Mags later. And they just completely just tore this music set a new one. Even in rehearsals, they were causing problems. They destroyed a $60,000 camera. And so Fear starts their set with beef bologna, and then like everyone's just getting just all kinds of crazy and rowdy, and it's just this, just an absolutely wild mosh pit. And then they go in to perform New York's All Right for saxophones. Leaving even changes one of the lyrics controversially from, New York's All Right if you want to get mugged and murdered, to New York's All Right if you want to get raped and murdered, which saying that on national television, that was probably very frowned upon by the censors. And then it just gets progressively more and more insane, because then at one point leaving, he drops a microphone stand. Then one of the members of the crowd, one of the punk rock fans, grabs the microphone and he just says, "New York sucks." And that was McKay, by the way, uh, um, from Minor Threat. And that really riles up the crowd even more. And so things just get just increasingly more and more insane. You got these punk rock fans who are leaping into the audience on top of audience members, and the microphone stand is still down. So then another guy who who's a member of the band Negative Approach, yeah, Brannon, he grabs the mic next and he says, "Negative Approach is gonna fuck you up." And that was on live television. So, and this was also at the point in SNL's history where they were on very thin ice after season 6. In large part, not just because of how bad that season was, but because of things like Charles Rocket, a cast member of the 6th season, dropping the F bomb on national television. So that got them a lot of ire and a lot of issues. And now this is happening again for the second straight season, and you got some guy, punk rock fan, saying Negative Approach is gonna fuck you up. And then you think, okay, all right, it can't possibly get any wilder, right? You're wrong. Like, I believe it was McKay again who grabbed a pumpkin from the set, and he's on stage, and this is when Fear was starting up Let's Start a War. And he grabs this pumpkin, and then as soon as he grabs the pumpkin and he gets on stage, it cuts to black. Because according to who you believe, or who you talk to, either it was another member who worked on SNL who decided to cut things to commercial, Dave Wilson, or it was actually NBC's head at the time, Brandon Tartikoff, who called in from his bed and was like, "Get this shit off the air. I've had enough of this." And according to Lee Ving, who is the lead singer and one of the guitarists for Fear, this is what happened when everything cut to black. The guy with the pumpkin throws the pumpkin, and it hits Dick Ebersol, who was there on set. I think he was behind a camera, and it hits him either in the face or in the chest. And Dick Ebersol was understandably fuming. And after that, the whole set was done. The punk rock fans, apparently they were rounded up either by security or by the police, and they were locked in different rooms in 30 Rock until the show was over. And leaving, he told the press that they caused like $200,000 of damage, but it actually was not really that much. It was like maybe you had the $60,000 camera and rehearsals, and I think the reality is it's only like maybe like $40 worth of damage to the set. It just looked worse than it actually was. So, all things considered, like there really wasn't a whole lot of damage that was done to the 30 Rock set. It was just it was just such a wild and crazy performance, and it was so out of hand that it had to be cut short, because who knows, like maybe even more damage could have been caused if they didn't cut things short when they did. um but it's just a crazy wild story, and it's definitely one of the most memorable, infamous performances when it comes to a band doing an appearance on SNL. As a result of everything, Fear was banned from SNL. Uh, the episode was banned from being rebroadcast for many, many years. It eventually did get some reruns, but they were censored versions, which is why I don't even know if there is even an actual uncut version of the broadcast that is in existence, because all of the clips that I've seen and the episode that I saw, it was a Comedy Central or Comedy Channel rerun, and I couldn't remember hearing the negative approach bit, but I did hear, New York sucks. But maybe they like turned the volume down or something, and or you can't hear the swear. But if there's one person who was loving it, other than just the fans that were in the audience at the time, it was John Belushi, who was there. He was there in the mosh pit. He was probably laughing his ass off about everything. One of his last, I think it honestly is his last contribution to SNL was a cold open, which is fun to see him interact with Donald Pleasance and Eddie Murphy and stuff like that. But you could tell that his heart wasn't in on the performance. Like he was just there because he was asked to be there, and Fear was going to perform. And yeah, his last contribution to SNL was him basically just punking Saturday Night Live, which I think is rather fitting, considering the kind of renegade rebel comic that John Belushi was. Um, but yeah, that's the story of Fear and the night that they were banned from SNL. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.